stitches locked. Touch the blue with this block, flipping right side up, upside down. And of course we have these star shapes in between. So what I'm doing right now is I'm going through, and you're sometimes going to have to retravel a ditch. It's part of the reason I like to use the invisible thread. Slide up now. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Quilters Apothecary. Today we are working on more of our ditch work in the body of this wonderful Opportunity Quilt of Yvonne's. So we're going to head down and I want to show you a few special things and talk a little bit about some of the different threads that I'm using and just the bobbin threads, just as a rehash for folks that are new on the channel. Again, we always want to remember with the different threads, these are all opinions. You want to try a spool or two of each, which I'm going to talk about a little bit. But first, let's head down and let's talk a little bit about the ditch work in the body and also how I utilize a curve that does not exactly match the curve that I need to do something and how I would shift that to be able to do that ditch work if you don't have a matching curve. Okay, so now we're looking at this section right here, and it's just a constant repeat with this block flipping right side up, upside down. And of course we have these star shapes in between. So what I'm doing right now is I'm going through and I'm ditching everything, and what I was going to do is then go through and do all the filler. I did change my mind. I'm going to go ahead and throw in the filler as I work my way down after ditching a throat space worth. So I've already done the top row, as you see in the texture shot here. And so now I'm just down to the next row, which is just a constant repeat until we get to the bottom border of what we have here. So the first thing I'm doing is, of course, ditching everything. Now the thing that I really want to show and kind of do a tutorial on, which I think needs to be done often for those that don't see it. I have a lot of new people that come on the page, and when we have a curve such as these two, you're not always going to have the proper curve to actually sew them. So when we get to those curved sections, I just want to show you how I shift my curve and make it work. You can make a similar curve. Of course, you do want to make sure that it's similar and not too different to actually ditch the curve sections. So I'm just going to finish up my leftover. And actually, I'll go ahead, do this. The one thing to remember as well when you're doing your ditch work is you're sometimes going to have to retravel a ditch. That's part of the reason I like to use the invisible thread. I'm going to slide up now. Get that done. I'm going to come down here. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to slide over. I want to go ahead, slide in here. And since I'm not coming back to that section until I get there, I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to go around here and up. Okay, so now I'm going to get my curve. It's the right curve. Let me rearrange my microphone here. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm gonna grab, for this particular curve, I'm using our regular large. It's not exactly what we'd want, as you can see here on this camera. It's not the perfect curve, but it's something that I can pivot as I work my way across that ditch. And before I do that, slide over here, get that done to stabilize that. Now I can slide in. Pivot. Now you notice as I move the ruler how I'm pivoting. Let me grab my step stool so I can get up to the bigger one. Okay, so now I'm up at the top curve, which is a bit bigger here. Let's move our camera over that way. And on that one, I'm going to use a little bit of a bigger curve. I'm going to use the double X large. And that's our Mystic Curve 2. And it's the same curve inside and outside. Anybody new to the rulers? And notice how I'm pivoting. I'm pivoting that ruler to stay in that curved ditch. Now I'm not going for show ditching, I'm going for a nice custom ditch work. And then I would just slide back here. And then very simply, I'm going to continue doing all of the ditch work that's in here. The one thing that I would like to say, and let me head over here. When I have a space, such as this right here, and that's a nice chunk of fabric right there, what I'm going to do is, as I ditch around here and come up to here, just so this doesn't get distorted after it's off the frame and has been washed a few times, all the white fabric, the batik, is going to be have the filler in it. But here, that's a little bit too much fabric to leave unquilted on the inside. So what I'm simply doing is just putting a dividing line here, such as this. I'm going to slide up. Right there on the point, I'm going to use that as my pivot. So I line it up, down, and then I have a nice divider there, which is going to stabilize this chunk of fabric right there. And it's also going to give a nice texture design as I quilt through this. Now I'm going to slide down here. Now again, the path that you choose sometimes is going to be retraveled. So for example, that line will probably be reditched. I'm going to slide up. Because some people forget what I'm using. I am using Superior Monopoly Invisible. I prefer that because it's polyester. It won't yellow or melt over time. It's not something that I want to hit with a hot iron. But we want to remember that most of the invisible threads are actually nylon, which would be fish line. And that would melt over time if you keep repeating heat, adding heat to it. You'll run across some sometimes that say it's heat resistant. Heat resistant nylon is not something that typically I've actually seen in reality, even though people might say that something's heat resistant. I am using the isocord and the bobbin. Another good choice would be glide. Some people might like bottom line. I personally have a few machines that are not fans of it, so I don't use it. I have a few machines that like it, but I also have a few that don't, and I typically in my studio want to have threads that I know will be liked by all the machines. Isocord and glide for me tends to be those two in my studio. You may choose or find that you like something better. Those are things that you want to explore, and you want to explore them, remember, before you buy 50 spools of anything. Isocord is my first favorite. That's all I typically have in my bobbin. Glide for me is my second favorite. I don't really have a third favorite simply because I don't need it yet. If the quality changed in those two threads, then I would probably do a little exploring. Superior's 40 weight embroidery type thread is Magnifico. That's the non-variegated, and I think the variegated form of that is Fantastico. Same thread. It's a 40 weight thread, which would like to be comparable to the isocord and glide, and maybe for some people it is. I just found that it wasn't a good match for me personally. The texture for me was just a little too much, and so I found that occasionally I would have some issues. That's not saying that you wouldn't. I'm just sharing that there are popular threads that people talk about, including isocord and glide, that your machine may not enjoy the way somebody else's machine would. And that's always something that I want to tell people. You know, again, you hear something from somebody about a thread, whether it's the thread I like or the thread somebody else's likes, and you want to just get a few spools, give it a try, see how your machine likes it, and then add it to your collection of utilizable thread for your machine. Just like piecing thread. I know a lot of people will use the isocord or the glide for piecing. Two of my piecing machines really like it, but my two favorite piecing machines do not like it for piecing. They like, what is the one that I love, Rich? It's the, pardon? Cairo Quilt, and that's by Filtech? Yeah. I also love Superior's Masterpiece for piecing. That's a really nice one. I just find that the other one that I found works just as well, and it's about half the price. And I get it, of course, in the cone when I'm piecing, as a lot of you know. So again, you just have to figure out what works best for your machine. And as we go through this, you just saw what I did with this star. which was I put an X in there to stabilize it because it was a nice chunk of fabric that I wanted to stabilize a little bit more. Went around all of it, and a few times I had to re-travel the ditch. Again, I have invisible thread, so that is my saving grace. And I'm here right in the corner, so before I go any further, so I don't forget, I'm just gonna slide up, put that little divider, stabilizer right in there, and now I'm gonna work my way over. So this is the process. What I've been doing when we haven't been filming is, of course, I like to put on my book on tape, and that works well for me. Keeps my ADHD at bay a bit because I'm focused on a good book while I'm working. My mind's not wandering to a million other things. For some people that might be music that would help them. Whatever it is that works for you, utilize. Keep yourself at your machine for the process. It's very easy, whether you own a business or not, to let the artist ADHD take over, and you'll be at the machine a while and wander away. You have to find little ways to do that. So now I'm over on my next block. I'm going to use again my extra large, but I'm going to use, because this curve is in, because the block is flipped, I don't want to turn or put my ruler behind my hopping foot because it's awkward. So this curve is going to match the sewing line of this curve. So I'm going to line that up. And again, I'm simply pause when you have to, shift your ruler. Again, I'm not doing perfect ditch work here. I'm just doing nice custom. There's a difference between nice custom and show ditch. And that's something that we need to, if you're doing client quilts, you need to remember. You can't spend 4 weeks on a regular custom priced quilt. You can on a show quilt, and usually it's actually more than that. So now I'm back to the small. So I've got my other curve now, which is a little bit smaller. And again, I always want to make sure as I'm doing this, keep my fingers within 2 to 3 inches of the hopping foot. If I have my finger down here, this guy's going to wobble up and down, and my hopping foot is going to either go under or it's going to go over. And I'm going to hit it, break a needle, pivot. Notice how I'm pivoting. Pivot, pivot, pivot. Pivot, pivot, pivot. Come down. Replace my finger so that I've got that stable and safe. And now I will go ahead and I will work my geese. And I'm simply going to go in one side, and then I'll come down the other, and then I'll slide back into here. Now, you've already seen me do that as we work our way through, so that's going to be my process as I work across the quilt. So Yvonne's beautiful Opportunity Quilt for the Guild is done, and it turned out really beautiful. I love it. I definitely am going to be buying some tickets. I really think it's a beautiful piece. And yet it's very, what's the word, unobtrusive as far as the quilting, but it's just very intense when you look at it, especially in like a low light type of environment. Now, again, as you saw when we went through it, and you definitely see the texture in the flybys as we do those, and have already done a little bit of them. This one's all about the texture, but yet it's still kind of a piecer's quilt when you look at it, because the texture is something that is second place in this, whereas the piecing takes the stage in this particular one, unlike some of the other ones that I've done. For example, Ruth Kay's beautiful piece, that was more about all of the texture in the quilting than it was about the piecing. This one is more about the piecing than it is about the texture. So as we look at this again, let me just kind of do a real quick what I did with it. So let's talk about this border over here. So with this border, I went down, as we saw in the original video when I started doing this, I went down out an inch from all of the geese, and then I did a line, and that's where I started my piano keys here between the geese on all four of the borders, and then I put filler to pop all of this beautiful piecing of the star in the corner as well as the geese around there. Now I kind of followed that through with the whole quilt. One of the few accents that I did to kind of put it over the top was I put that lovely triangle shape here, filled it with a lotus, and then did the filler around. That way that's something that's going to catch the eye and move the eye around. So the eye will probably start on the outer edge of the border. When you look at the quilt up close, and you look at the filler and how the geese pop, and then you'll move down to the pinstripe or beadboard piano keys, and then you'll kind of move into the quilt. And on this sash, of course, what I did was I simply used the middle of the lotus triangle area as well as the points of the star to keep them all even, and I simply did a line through because I wanted this left puffy just for the texture, but I also needed to have this stabilized. We did use the double bat again. We used the poly down, we used the 80-20. That way it's gonna hang well if it hangs on a wall, but also it'll be nice and you'll be able to see the texture as you work your way through the quilt. And then of course all of this beautiful white accent batik has the filler in. It just came off the machine, so it needs to hang for a bit to hang straight. Has all of the filler, which pops all of that beautiful batik piecing and bally piecing that they put in there. They chose some beautiful fabrics. And then in the stars, of course, as you see or saw when we did our flyby, they have those beautiful X's in there. So everything pops forward. I have to say, it's an incredibly beautiful quilt. It's very striking, but it's unobtrusive. You know, the quilting doesn't take the quilt over. It actually does highlight. That being said, because we are here on the Patreon channel, as well as my dear Yvonne is on my Patreon channel, so let me show you a few of the mistakes that I made, which no big deal. It happens to all of us. It's going to happen. And it's a signature. That's it. So with this, and again, this is one of those things that very few people are going to catch it. And if they do, I'm going to consider it's my Amish block in the quilt. So again, Rich, if we go over here to the triangle area where I have the lotus, let's look at that. Can you see the texture on that? Is that good, or do we need to do it over here where there's less light? There we go. So this guy right here, let's go in on that. So you see that? That's on all of these areas around the border of the quilt, just inside here where it divides between the two stars. I put that, if you want to kind of go down that side. You can see what I did. See what I did? See what I did? I got around to the bottom. Now slide on over to the bottom. Yeah, okay. Here we go. So what I did is, as I'm working down the quilt, I started doing my filler automatically before I got down to the bottom, which of course takes off the tip. Now, this feather turned out so cool, and this feather turned out so cool, and that's when I realized, oh crap, I'm supposed to put the thing in there. But again, there's so much going on in this quilt that unless you're one of my Patreon folks that just heard me say that, you'll never catch it. So that is my Amish block right there. I'll call that my Amish block, my humble block. So there we go. We have a finish. And our dear Yvonne is going to pick this up tomorrow and get it bound. And then they're going to get it up for the Opportunity Quilt. And Yvonne is actually going to, we've had a lot of people emailing from Patreon saying, you know, how do I get tickets? And yes, they're going to open that up to everybody. Of course, you know, it's a great opportunity for anybody. The quilt is beautiful. I know I'm going to get a bunch of tickets because I want it too. So I will post on a separate post just a printed thing of where to go if you want to get any of these tickets for this particular quilt. So there we go. As always, thank you so much for joining us. Know you're loved. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. And enjoy this wonderful summer. Goodbye, everybody.